Hi, welcome to History 1302, U.S. History since 1877. Now, this is going to be a very short video presentation that is going to guide you to complete the first exam. It's going to provide instructions, strategies as to how to go about actually completing this exam. It's going to tell you what the exam is going to be like, when the exam is due, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let us start with the most basic information. What the exam is going to be like. Okay, the first exam, which is due on June the 10th. Okay, so let me start by saying that this first exam is not going to be scheduled for a specific time and date. Okay, it's not going to be something that you're going to be online, presented with information, and then you're going to have a limited amount of time, like an hour and a half, to answer the questions and the key terms and then turn it in. But rather, what this first exam is going to be like is more like a take-home assignment, writing assignment. It's a writing exercise, in other words, that you do on your own, in your own schedule, day by day. I suggest again that you pretty much spend some time day by day in pretty much answering the questions and the key terms, so everything can be ready by June the 10th, so you can turn it in by June the 10th. So it's a take-home exam. Okay, it's not going to be, of course, scheduled for a specific time and day, but rather something that you do on your own from today, which is June the 1st, all the way to June the 10th when you turn it in. Okay, so it's a take-home exam. Okay, so that's very important to note. So what this means is that what I suggest is that as you're watching those video lectures, that you're supposed to be watching topic number 1, topic number 2, and topic number 3. There are 3 videos for the first topic, there are 3 videos for the second topic, and there's only 1 video for the third. What I suggest that you're doing is that each day watch 1 session, okay? 1 video, in other words, okay? You're not, I don't know, well, there's some students that can pretty much watch, for a long period of time, several videos. They can watch 3 videos in a day. Well, if you have the time, you have the energy to do that, yeah, that's fine. But, if you have other responsibilities, you have other things to attend to, work, and so on, what I suggest is that each day you reserve some time to watch 1 video. In other words, 1 video per day. Okay, that's what I will do if I have multiple things to do, multiple tasks, multiple responsibilities, and so on. Okay, and so take notes as thoroughly as possible on that information. Okay, as you're watching the video, take notes. This is not to say that you have to write word for word everything I'm saying, but pay attention to the analysis, to the ideas, the details. Everything is important. Okay, extract the most important information, but at the same time, if I'm actually giving examples, about, for example, how the modern industrial city in the United States came about, what were the features of this new city? This is the kind of city that we inhabit today, for example. And I'm providing a lot of details as to how people lived in the city, what was the most important activities for people, and so I'm giving details and examples. All of that is important, all of that. Okay, so it's very important because when the questions are presented again to you to actually describe what was going on in the United States, let's say in the late 19th century, I want to see in the answers, all of the information I presented, the examples, the details, the analysis, etc. Again, that's the only thing. That's the only way I can actually measure how much you've learned. In other words, in this course. All right. So, once again, I advise you to be watching those videos day by day from now on. Don't wait until June the 9th or June the 8th to say, oh my God, I need to catch up with the lectures. I'm gonna have to pretty much see everything in a day or day and a half, and try to answer the questions and the key terms from the exams. Again, if you can do that, that's fine. I'm not saying that you're not supposed to, but it can be very tiring, I will say, mentally, to do everything at the very end. So I advise you to be doing this, day by day. Now, let's go to the exam instructions, which are already posted on Blackboard, by the way. Okay. Those instructions are already available on Blackboard. And again, this is something that I advise you to be already doing, because it is a writing assignment that is due on June the 10th, the exam itself. Okay, so let's start with the most basic information here. So the exam is going to consist of two main parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 consists of answering a series of questions on only one topic. Again, so from the 3 topics that you're supposed to review in these days, one topic, again, is being selected for you to answer questions of, in other words. And what is that topic? That's the second topic of the semester. It's titled The Socioeconomic Transformations of the Late 19th Century. So this is a very important topic that you should be reviewing, in these coming days, okay? Because part 1 of the exam, which is worth 70 points, is based entirely on the second topic. So what I advise you to do is, make sure that this topic is being reviewed, that you spend time watching those lectures, taking notes, and so on, because part 1 of the first exam has about, if we scroll, let's say, all the way down to the exam questions, okay, it's telling you here, part 1, the topic section, and it tells you to answer all of the questions on this topic, which is topic number 2, the socioeconomic transformations of the late 19th century in the U.S. And I pretty much listed a series of questions. There's about 3 questions that you need to answer. And, this is not an essay. This is not like an English composition where you're supposed to have a superstructure, like a topics, paragraph, and then a series of arguments and conclusion. It's not like that. So what you're supposed to be doing is just look at the question and answer each question as thoroughly as possible based on the information I presented on those video lectures. So it's exclusively based on, again, on the information I presented on those video recordings. So, I emphasize this over and over again because some students perhaps miss, that part of the instruction, and what they do is that as they're answering, for example, those questions, it's perhaps easy for them to look for material elsewhere in other sources outside of the class. And again, this is going to result in losing points, or to have the whole exam disqualified. Okay, so you want to avoid that. So all you need to do is just look at those videos and use that material to answer the questions here. So what the questions, again, present here is that you're supposed to be explaining the social and economic changes that took place in the late 19th century in the United States by looking at specific regions. So first you start by looking at the North, and that's in the first video session 1. Again, of the second topic, I pretty much spent most of that session talking about the North, how the North was modernizing. Okay, it was giving rise to big cities. New industries were on the rise. There was a second industrial revolution taking place in the U.S. that was really transforming the way Americans lived, particularly in the North. Now Americans are moving to the city. Americans are moving by the millions now to live in cities, in large industrial cities, populated by millions of people, many of whom were also immigrants coming from Europe as well. Okay, very diverse cities, culturally, ethnically, and so on and so forth. So this is what I expect that, for example, the first question is asking you to, okay, explain how is it that Americans were changing in the North? How is it that the North was modernizing? Okay, focusing on the different factors that led to the modern industrial city, as well as the different social classes that lived in those cities, the different groups that live in the cities, and their strategies to adapt to the city, to the way of life of the city. I talk about all of that. And I also talk about city culture, what is called urban culture. What was the culture of the city like? What were the main activities, that people were carrying out on a day-to-day basis, So again, try to answer as thoroughly as possible that question. That was the first question that you were supposed to answer. And pretty much all that information is in session 1 of the second topic. Then, the second question, it says, explain the transformations that transpire in the U.S. South. Now let's look at another region, the South, the U.S. South, the transformation that happened in the U.S. South after the Civil War, which changed dramatically this region from the traditional forms of social and economic organization, okay, into a more modern industrial society. In other words, the South was very traditional. People lived in farms for the most part, in the countryside, in the South. And there were no industries, even up to the time of the Civil War, there were no factories, no industries to speak of in the South. It was an agricultural region, but after the Civil War, the South is beginning to industrialize, and now Southern farmers, a great many of them, were moving also to cities. I talk about which specific industries were emerging in the South and how the way of life of the peoples of the South are beginning to change. I'll discuss all of that very thoroughly, something that you have to answer as well very thoroughly here. The third question looks at a different region, and that is the West. Okay, and this is something that also is explained in the video recordings. By the way, to answer the second question, more than likely you will have to watch entirely session 2 of the second topic. So session 1 talks about the North, okay, the changes that the North was going through in the late 19th century. Session 2 talks about the U.S. South. And session 3 talks about the American West, how the American West was also developing. In other words, how Americans were moving in great numbers by the millions into the West, transforming this Wild West into a new West, transforming the landscape, bringing industries, enterprises. They were forming towns and cities. I talk about all of that, and of course immigrant groups coming from Mexico to work in places like Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona, of course, Chinese immigrants coming to California as well. I talk of all of that, and also how the lives of the Native Americans who lived in the Wild West also changed with the coming of the reservation. So you're supposed to go over session 3 to answer the third question, okay? Because the session 3 of the second topic pretty much devotes most of its attention to the American West, okay? So in order to gain those 70 points, to earn those 70 points in the first exam, you will have to watch very thoroughly the second topic of the semester, watch those 3 videos, and answer those 3 questions as fully as possible, okay? As fully as possible. So if you're trying to ace this exam, so try to answer as much as you can those questions by providing all the information that you can. Okay, don't pretend that I know what you're talking about and skip, details and data just because you mention certain things. In other words, okay, it's important that it's important that you spend some time actually elaborating on this information as fully as possible. Okay, so that is part one. Part one is the topic section in which you are answering the main questions on topic number two. And there's also a part two to this exam, which is worth 30 points. 30 points will come from part two, which is the key terms section. This is the key terms section. And in order to go about answering the key terms, you're supposed to watch topic number one. Okay, the first topic of the semester is called The Idea of Progress in the Making of Modern America. So for sure, in order to complete this writing assignment, which is the first exam, you must watch very thoroughly topic number one and topic number two. That is really the essence of the first exam. The first topic and the second topic, again, are a must. You cannot skip them, in other words. Because if you skip, let's say, topic number one, if you decide not to watch it, how are you supposed to actually answer the key terms? You're going to lose 30 points. And, it's very important that you pay attention to part number two. Because, again, there are 30 points. And even though you can gain those 70 points from part one, that's a C. That's a C minus, actually. If you just stop there and you don't actually go on and, answer the key terms, well, you're going to lose 30 points. You're going to lose the opportunity to raise your grade from a 70 all the way to perhaps an 85, a 90, or 100. Again, to pretty much earn at least a B in this first exam. At the very least, that's what you're supposed to be striving. At the very, very least, to earn a B plus, why not ace it? So for part two, you're supposed to watch topic number one. Okay, topic number one is a must. It's called The Idea of Progress. There's also three videos presented there. And what you're supposed to do in part two is choose two key terms from a set of three. There are three key terms presented there. The first key term is called the 19th century scientific and technological revolutions. That's the first key term. The second key term is called the economic progress through capitalism. That's the second key term. And the third key term is called evolution and social Darwinism, the theory of evolution and social Darwinism. And what you're supposed to do here is not only identify the term. To identify the term, all you need is to write a sentence. But here, you're supposed to not just identify it, but describe the term and thoroughly explain the term as well. Okay? So, the answers have to be extended. Okay? So, it's not just a couple of sentences or a small paragraph, but there's a lot to be said, about the 19th century. For example, the first key term, the 19th century scientific and technological revolutions. I spent really an entire video session one, okay, of this topic, just talking about the scientific and technological revolutions of the 19th century, okay, which gave rise to modern science, the science that we use today. Most of the technologies, not all of them, of course, but most of the technologies that we use today to sustain this kind of high-tech world that we live in, this advanced technological civilization that we have built. Most of those technologies were born back in the 19th century, like electricity, for example. Okay, so I talk about all of that, how there was a new science on the rise in the 19th century. Okay, I talk about the new science, what's called modern science, the science of today. What are the main ideas of this science? It's a materialist science, by the way. It's the science of matter. It's the science that studies the material world and how the material world functions. So I talk about how people in the past, centuries prior to the science, how people actually went about studying the world by looking at, for example, spiritual forces. The old science that existed before our modern science was a science based on religion. It was a science based on the idea that there were spirits and forces, spiritual forces, spiritual entities that were actually controlling the material world. So everything that happened in the world of matter, had a spiritual or religious explanation to it. In other words, and I also talk about how this science called modern science displaced this old science based on religion and introduced a more materialistic approach to study the world of matter. In other words, that instead of looking at spiritual or religious explanations for what happens in this world, the new scientists of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century that gave us this science began to propose that instead of looking at spiritual and religious forces for what happened in the world, that all we needed to do was simply study the world of matter, the elements, the forces of matter, the chemicals, the particles, in order to understand how this worked, to look for natural laws, the laws of nature, in other words. So it's important that you pay attention, to that information and say, okay, so the professor here is asking me about, the scientific revolution, the revolution of science of the 19th century that brought the science of today. How people began to actually study the world and so on and so forth by, gathering facts and making observations, material observations of the natural world and so on and so forth. And how all of the knowledge that they accumulated was used to create new technologies. Okay? New technologies, what today we call modern technology. Things like electricity, the telegraph, for example, was born back in the 19th century. The telephone was also born in the 19th century. The light bulb was also born in the 19th century. Chemistry as well, chemical industries as well, producing chemicals as well. And also modern medicine. I talk about modern medicine as well, things like vaccines, things like, pharmaceutical treatments, pharmaceutical drugs, the field of psychology was born. I talk about all of that in the first session. So the answers have to be very thorough. You cannot just spend a couple of lines or a small paragraph to try to answer that key term and just move on. You will have to watch the entire video presentations, session 1, session 2, and session 3, because those sessions discuss very thoroughly those key terms. So those are extended answers once again. In the past, students who have earned full points on those key terms have written anywhere between 1 page to page and a half, let us just say, for each of those key terms, double space, of course, double space, okay? Because each key term is worth 15 points. In total, if you choose 2, those are 30 points. So to earn those full 30 points, you're going to have to demonstrate that you reviewed this material, you took notes, and you're able to describe in your own words what those key terms are, okay? Very fully as possible, okay? So let us just go back to the exam instructions in terms of the format and so on. Looking at the format, okay, here it is. So, so in terms of the format, you're supposed to type the answers to the questions and the key terms using regular font, like Times New Roman, font number 12. Okay, double space. You're supposed to, double space. Number each page. It has to be page numbered. With a cover page with your student information. Now, the cover page does not count towards the body of the work. Okay, it doesn't count. Okay, and part one, what it says is that part one alone, in other words, answering the questions of part one, okay, will have to be a minimum of 4 full pages in length. So just for part one, we're talking about 4 full pages in length. Okay, 4 full pages to earn those 70 points from part one. And there are no limits as to the maximum pages as well. So if you decide you want to write more than 4 pages, it's fine. You're not going to be penalized for writing more than 4 pages, but you'll have to write a minimum of 4 full pages. Now for part two, there are no limits to the number of pages. As I mentioned, try to write extensive answers for those key terms as much as you can, because what you want to do is earn as many points from part two. Okay, I advise you again to not ignore part two, not just answer, those key terms in a rush because you just want to turn in this work, or you just don't want to review, that information fully on the first topic. This is very important. There's a very important, again, 30 points that can actually get you to the B or A range, in the exam, as a matter of fact, okay? So, once again, part one alone, 4 full pages, okay? And part two, you can write as many as you want, of course, okay? So, it's a writing assignment. It's a take-home writing assignment, if you will. Once again, as a whole, the entire work must contain only lecture material. So no internet, no online encyclopedia material or other sources will be allowed. So as soon as I start reading something I did not lecture, and if you use outside sources in a significant way, then your work will be disqualified. I'm actually, in advance pretty much, warning you that, it's very important. The instructions are very clear. No outside material, no outside sources when you're answering the questions and key terms. So all together, you must save all your work. Part one and part two must be in a single file, okay? Not separate files, but in a single file. Just indicate where, you indicate that this is part one and part two, okay? So if you're about to answer the key terms, just write part two and pretty much identify the key term and pretty much, describe it, and, as fully as possible. So everything has to be saved in a single file. Please, use Word or PDF to save it, because Blackboard is not going to actually open it if it's in another, application. So if you save it on some other application, it's going to be very difficult for me to open it up, in other words, and grade it. So it has to be either on Word or PDF, and this writing assignment or first exam has to be uploaded on Blackboard by Thursday, June the 10th, 2021. Okay, so so those are the instructions. I just went over the instructions with you, and I hope you're now able to know what to do now from now on. In other words, okay, so from now on, this is what I have to do. I know that for sure topic number 1 and topic number 2 are a must, because they're going to be covered in the exam. Now, if you ask, for example, what about topic number 3? Well, topic number 3, there's only one video there. There's only one video. And for topic number 3, there's going to be, again, extra. It's going to be based on for extra credit. Okay? So if you wish to do extra credit to gain 10 points in this exam, watch the only video available for topic number 3, that is called In Search of New Frontiers, and also included in your exam. It's only one video, by the way. So if you just watch that just single video, And if you answer that question, there's only one question, explain the multiple ways the frontier shaped the American character and why Americans were in search of new frontiers abroad after the frontier was declared closed in 1890. Okay, so how Americans began to move outwards, in other words, into the rest of the world after 1890, because there was no more land available in the American West. All of the land of the American West, called the frontier, was closed. In other words, Americans had reached all the way to the West Coast. They have pretty much settled all of the land from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so after 1890, Americans began to search for new horizons, new frontiers, new opportunities elsewhere, overseas, in different parts of the world, particularly Latin America. I talk about that, in that video. So, if you answer that question very thoroughly by looking at just this one video from the third topic, then you can earn an extra 10 points, towards the exam. Okay? So once again, I repeat, it's very important that you watch this material day by day. Topic number 1 and topic number 2. Each topic has 3 videos each. That's a must. So those are 6 video lectures, 6 video presentations that you must review. From today, June the 1st, all the way to June the 8th, June the 9th, because by June the 10th, you're supposed to be already turning in the first exam, again, which is based on, once again, on questions that are going to ask you questions on the second topic and the key terms on the first topic. Okay, I hope this review session was helpful for you. So if you have any questions, any doubts, any concerns as to how to go about reviewing this material, what the exam is going to be like, etc., well, please let me know. This video, of course, presentation explained everything as thoroughly as possible. But if you still have any questions regarding this assignment, please let me know. Send me an email and I will respond immediately. Okay? This is all I have for you. And then I'll see you in the next video presentation for the second exam later on. Okay? Thank you.